So mace is a component of nutmeg. So most of you probably know what nutmeg looks like. Looks kind of like these, but before they are harvested, it is wrapped on the outside with what is called mace. So mace is basically just smells and tastes like nutmeg light, which is good because nutmeg is extremely potent and aggressive. A little goes a really long way, and it's really easy to overdo it if you're not paying close attention. So mace is a great way to sort of hedge your bet and make the magic happen with a little less concern. I'm also going to add some cardamom seeds. I'm going to add both green and black. I'm trying to kill off a bag of already broken up green cardamom because I bought some fresh cardamom pods, and this is as good a way as any to do it. So I'm going to add both green and black. I'm going to break open the black cardamom pods and get the seeds in there. Because I really don't feel like grinding up the shell. It also makes it a little bit easier to manage because black cardamom is surprisingly vigorous in a way that green isn't. Like, they're both very strong aromatics and flavors, but they are extremely different. Black cardamom is much smokier, much more savory in that. And whereas green cardamom, you see that most often in sweet applications, at least in my experience. I, however, kind of switch hit, and they go in both, because I really like cardamom. So we're going to throw in a couple of black cardamom pods, the equivalent of a couple of green cardamom pods. And that should just about do it. So at least as far as spices go. So this is more or less our mixture. I'm not going to add anything else that's going to be ground up. I am going to be throwing in a cinnamon stick, or just a general piece of cinnamon bark, but I'm going to throw that in whole so that it's easy to spot and easy to remove. I don't even have to toast that one. That's in the amount of time it's going to take to cook this stuff, that'll work out just fine. Alright, so now, oh right, I'm an idiot. I did forget one more aggressively savory spice. It was staring me right in the face. I'm not sure how I missed it. Cumin, or jeera. Now this is one that I tend to err on the... I tend to utilize cumin because it is, again, it's another one that's extremely easy to overdo, and I don't want to overdo it. It's not overpowering in the sense that like rosewater could be or nutmeg could be, but it is, I would consider it actually to be a little bit more offensive in large quantity. Like, for example, too much rose, you just kind of turn away and ignore it. Too much cumin, and you're like, you might have to go talk to somebody, and possibly noisily. A chef I used to work with actually said he always hated using cumin because he thought it smelled like said it smelled like going to the zoo, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I couldn't say one way or another because I haven't been to a zoo in decades, at least. I think, when was the last time? Maybe I've gone to the Providence Zoo before I moved out of Rhode Island, so that would have been almost 15 years ago. Oof. Alright, so those are the spices. I'm just going to throw them on the stove real quick, give them a little toasty toast. I need to not be an idiot and put the cumin in here. Where did it go? Pardon me for just a second. This is This is my bag of, by and large, dessert spices, which you may have noticed, a lot of the spices that are in this blend right here are somewhat are mildly to aggressively desserty. All right, so we're just going to take these, put them over here onto a medium-low flame, and we're going to give them a little toast. Now, while that's working, I'm going to gather the remainder of the stuff. So I'm going to take our cinnamon stick. I'm going to grab a single bay leaf, preferably a big one if I can find it. I bought this batch of bay leaves that I bought is kind of crappy, so maybe I'll have to go with 2 smaller ones. That's okay. Yeah, that'll do. 1, 2. And that's just about it for the spices. Now, for the other flavorings, we're going to get a little bit more intricate. So we need, hang on while I toss these spices real quick. I just have to make sure that nothing is burning. My nose will tell me almost certainly when things start to get funky or scorchy, but I have to be careful that one doesn't start to go there before the rest of them, which is why I broke them all up into pieces that are about the same size. That's also why I didn't toast the cinnamon stick, because even if I did break this up, it's thick, it's woody, it's sturdy. It would take longer to toast and get the aromatic oils going than the rest of these. It's substantially longer that other stuff would absolutely burn. And so we don't. Now, toasting spices is not a super big deal. It's just just go for on medium to medium-low heat and pay attention to it. If you're in a hurry, basically like most cooking, the faster you go, the higher the heat, and the more attention you need to pay. Since I am currently dividing my attention between the pan, the camera, and the stream, I have it on a slightly lower heat than most people would normally use, and that's okay. Like, I would rather it take me an extra minute or so to get the proper toasting out of it than run the risk of burning any of the spices. Ooh, and I can already smell both the mace, the coriander, and a little bit of the cumin underneath. I don't want the cumin to be too overpowering. That's the whole thing. I really don't. All right, so now I don't know if you heard those pops, but there's a few bits of the spices have started to. There was some residual water in there somewhere, hiding, and so now it has evaporated, and we got a little pop. So now we've got a little bit. You can see some of the. It's not smoking exactly. Like, I can see just a little bit of steamy, smoky goodness floating off the top of this, and the coriander seeds have turned from a pale blonde to more of an amber, which means I'm pretty much good to go. So that's going off. And now we add the other thing that I need to toast, and that is coconut. So coconut is a fantastic tool in the kitchen, but you have to be careful when you're picking it up because most of the stuff you buy in Western-style supermarkets is sweetened. So if you're going to do something like this, you don't want sweetened coconut. Trust me. So I'm going to put about a quarter cup or so, maybe a little bit more, just enough to coat the bottom of this little pan here of coconut in here, and I'm going to toast it ever so gently. Maybe a little bit more. So the reason that I'm using coconut is because, honestly, it's a very common thing in korma. One of the primary cooking liquids that you use for korma is actually coconut milk, which I'm busting out right here. As soon as I'm so glad that I spent the time to dig out my can opener, because my goodness, that would have been a very, very messy day. if I hadn't. All right, so we've got our coconut milk, we've got some spices, we have our larger spices that we aren't grinding up because they're just going to hang out in the pan. We have some coconut toasting, and the last thing we really need is some heat. Now, where did I put them? Did I do something dumb, like take it out and then forget I took it out? That's possible. Even likely. Pardon me just a second while I give the coconut a little toss. So we're starting to get some color on it. You don't want it to be dark necessarily. Basically, you just want it to pretend you're making macaroons. Not macaron, macaroons, the giant coconut thingy. So you want your coconut to be a gentle sort of amber color. Blonde, even. Alright, so there we go. We have some gently toasted coconut. I'm going to let this sit in the pan for another moment or two so that it can continue toasting. And now, as I was saying about heat, I have just one serrano chile. Now, normally, I would go a little bit harder with the quantity of chiles in here, but I bought several of these this week, and each and every one of them so far has been explosively hot. Oh, hey, we'll tell you. What's up? Welcome, welcome. I know I got a late start. Doctor's appointment ran late, and then so did the train. But yeah, so one whole serrano chile, along with the large spices and what's going to be the small spices. I'm actually going to grind up the coconut with the spices because that will offer sufficient violence to ensure adequate pulverizing of the coconut. Because I don't want, ideally, I want everything to be nice and smooth if I can get it there. I've had korma that's gone grainy, and I'm not exactly a fan. So, now we've got our spices, we've got our coconut, we have, in just a second, I'm gonna let that cool before I wipe it out. I'm gonna make a whole bunch of noise over here with my spice grinder as I obliterate this thing. Let me move this over here. That's a little better. Ish. There we go. Okay. Move you out of the way. Pro tip, if you're ever in somebody else's kitchen and they do something like this, like they've got a pot or a pan or something like this, or like this, or like this, it means don't touch it without the towel. It means it's hot, or at least at the time that the last person who was handling it stopped touching it, it was hot enough. It was hot and could injure you. That is actually a tip I highly recommend for all home cooks because, frankly, I have seen enough people inadvertently hurt themselves quite badly in home kitchens because they did not realize X or Y was hot. And then they did something dumb, like grab it anyway. So. Now, real quick, I'm just going to make a bunch of noise, grinding up the spices and the coconuts. Here they're all standing in a row. This is going to make a lot of noise because the spices are fairly sturdy. The long peppers in particular are very tough, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to toast them, to soften them up a little bit and make them more susceptible to being ground. Let's see, where are we here? Whoo-wee! All right. Oh yeah, that smells really good. I don't like, oof. And you do want it fine, right? So, and you'll notice that my mixture is on the brown side rather than the white or the yellow. That is mostly because I toasted the coconut. Not everybody does. And I may have toasted it a little bit darker than some. Also, this is not coconut isn't using coconut is almost universal, but not quite. I have seen korma done with coconut, but I've also seen it done with cashew. I've seen it done with almond. I actually like doing it with almond because I tend to have almonds on hand more often than I do most other nuts, or at least I did before I moved. Now, who knows? I may never have nuts in the fridge again because that's basically I only ever use them when I'm hiding them in something else. Pretty much every other time I'm going to use extracts. Like almond extract, I use that probably more often than I use vanilla, truth be told. Alright, so now that we have our spices, we are going to heat up our pan, that big one on camera right behind me. Now, if we didn't have coconut, like I said, we would put it in other ways. You could use, a lot of times this is made with coconut milk. In addition, I could use coconut oil. Good Lord, that's bright. So I'm going to cook this in some coconut oil because I happen to have it on hand. Now, coconut oil is cool because it's one of the ones that's solid at room temperature. Well, okay, at some room temperatures. I'm gonna hazard a guess and say in a lot of places in India, it never actually solidifies, but that's just me spitballing. It's like, so we melt a little bit of coconut oil in the bottom of this pan, nice and easy. We are going to, first off, we're going to throw in some onions to caramelize a little bit and get a little bit more flavor development. I'm pulling out a few other things in the meantime. I'm gonna open up this can of coconut milk after I'm gonna throw the onions in the pan first. Here we go. There we go. I'm gonna let them get going. Nothing fancy, just a little toss. And it's not even a whole heck of a lot of onions. I'm also going to peel and chunk some ginger to add to this, just because I want a little bit more aggressive ginger flavor in this, but I don't want to spend the time finely mincing it. So I'm just going to put in like 2 or 3 really big chunks that are going to just sit there and be obvious, like the cinnamon stick and the bay leaves. This is the sort of thing that you see and you eat around it, or if you don't want to eat around it, you pick it out if it happens to end up in your bowl or on your plate. Which is one of those things. A lot of times, if a dish is served with something like that, like a chunk of ginger or a chunk of galangal or some large whole spices, those are not only useful for imparting flavor to the dish, they are sort of a clue to the diner as far as what the flavor profile of the dish might be if they aren't familiar with it, right? So I personally like doing stuff like this just so that my potential diners don't have too many unexpected surprises. Unless that's what they want. That's the thing. By and large, though, most people who want dinner don't want to don't want to deal with the unexpected or the surprise unless that is their primary goal and eating is their secondary. All right. So we got onions going, we got a couple chunks of ginger going. I'm going to, where's the frickin', okay. Is it this way? Maybe? Nope, never mind. This one is stupid, I forgot. No, never mind, it's working. So one of the many downsides of coconut milk in particular, the cans tend to be difficult to open with conventional can openers. Usually you end up having to turn them sideways, or just sort of brute force it and hope for the best, which is, I kind of did both. I not only turned it to the side, but I also just sort of yanked it open. I was just like, yeah. So once these onions have a little bit of color to them and the ginger has started to infuse its flavor and aroma into our oil, that is when we are going to start adding our other stuff, right? We're going to add our larger spices. We're going to add our chili. We're going to let that rock for a minute or two, and then we're going to add our liquids and our chicken, and we're done. So I took the serrano chili, I split it, I slid it twice, so now it's in 4. I'm going to take our, that was an immediate surge of capsaicin, holy crap. We're going to take our cinnamon stick, we're going to throw that in there. It's going to hit the hot oil and gather and start gathering its strength. I'm going to hold off on the bay leaf for another moment or two because these are very thin, they can be very delicate, and I don't want them to burn before I add anything else. So we're going to let this go. Now I could add some garlic, I could add some more ginger, I could add some more chili, but I think I'm good on this, so I'm going to add the bay leaves. I'm going to add my spices and my coconut, and then I'm going to start adding my liquid. I'm going to start with the coconut milk, because there's no reason not to, right? Oh my gosh, this is... The one downside to grinding up nuts is that emptying your spice grinder becomes a bit of a pain in the neck. I gotta turn this way down to make sure nothing burns before I get at this emptied. There we go. And I'm gonna give this one quick stir. Make sure most of the spices and some of the coconut hit that hot oil and continue to get whoosh. And now we add the coconut milk. So what we're doing here is we're building a flavorful aromatic braising liquid. Now, that's only 1 can of coconut milk, so that doesn't look like much and it doesn't seem like much. But that's okay, because we're not done yet. We are going to make up the difference with additional liquid momentarily. Because we're going to add, first and foremost, we're going to add in our chicken. So I added in a little bit of liquid just to make sure all the spices didn't burn while I did the rest, right? This also allows the spices and the chilies a little bit of a moment to infuse. So now we're just going to dump all our chicken in here. If I could do it without causing unnecessary disaster. Okay. There we go. I'm going to run my spatula along the inside and get whatever's left of the marinade, which was, as if you remember from yesterday, it was mostly just yogurt and garam masala, plus salt and pepper and a little bit of mustard oil. So I'm just going to break up all those marinated pieces here. I'm going to stir it around, make sure that every piece of chicken that we cut up is fully separated from its compatriots, so we don't end up having something undercooked or overcooked or whatever have you. While I do that, I'm going to rinse out the coconut milk can and get rid of it, because it was pretty much good to go as it was. Hoik. And now, since it does still look like it needs more liquid, how are we going to fix that? Well, I don't know if you remember yesterday, when we boned out all of these chicken thighs, we threw them in a pot with some water. We threw the bones in a pot with some water to make some chicken stock. Ta-da! That is where we're going to get that extra liquid, right here. Nice fond blanc de volaille in French, or white chicken stock in English. We're going to add probably about a cup or so. No, a little less than a cup. Let's start with about a half a cup. and we'll give it a gentle stir. We don't want to splash. We don't want to make any kind of a mess across the, we don't want raw chicken juices anywhere, right? We got to be careful about this. It is worth the trouble to be cautious, careful, slow, and deliberate when you're doing something like this. I promise. Because the last thing you want is like surprise raw chicken juice somewhere that you didn't notice, and then you make someone very sick, and then you are in a great deal of trouble. Like, for example, there is a drop of chicken juice right over here that's spattered despite my best efforts. So I'm going to have to wash this cutting board very carefully before I use it again. Now, real quick, I'm just going to run my finger along the inside of this spice grinder because there's a little bit more just kind of hanging around in here. The high fat content of coconut resulted in the all the spices and whatnot sort of adhering to the inside of the spice grinder. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that requires attention to clean up. All right, so now we have everything incorporated. We've got enough liquid that it won't be an issue necessarily. Maybe a little bit more, because I would like to braise this for a while. Not too terribly long, but... And also, as the chicken cooks, it's going to release a lot of extra liquid as well. So it won't take, even if this does end up being a little shy on liquid, the chicken will take care of itself. All right, so now we have everything nicely mixed. And it's just about at a simmer. Not quite, but it's almost there. But in the meantime, while that heats up, I'm going to take a second. Oh my God, husky dog, come on. Also, happy birthday. Everybody, go get, wish Cantos the husky a happy birthday. It is cut. I slid it down the middle twice. So the inside is exposed, and it's a serrano, not a jalapeno. But yes, I threw that in there to add extra heat, and also so that I could fish it out later. Yeah. All right. Now, pardon me for just a moment while I do a dish or two. I'm currently cleaning up the marinade. And I'm also going to put away a whole bunch of dishes from yesterday because I ran the dishwasher before I went to bed, and everything that's in the dish drainer right now is now clean and properly dry and can be put away. Mostly a giant pile of to-go containers. Like I say that, but they're cups, pints, and quarts on paper, even though that a lot of times that's a lie. So I'm going to put those away. Get this out of the way. Yeah, and now we are at a proper simmer. So we can clap the lid on this, throw it in a preheated oven. In this case, I set it to 3 1/4 or about 160 Celsius, and we're going to forget about it for a while. Probably close to an hour, actually. An hour should be enough. So that's done. Yay. Now we can forget about it. So I'm going to set myself a little timer for an hour, real quick. Or at least I would like to. Here we go. And now I will clean that cutting board that I spoke of moments ago. All right. Move some stuff out of the way, get everything ready for a proper cleaning, because cleaning up after raw poultry is usually very important. Like, you got to make sure that everything is nice and clean, nice and disinfected, nice and sanitized. It's important because, as I said yesterday, and I frequently say, one of the most dangerous things you can have in your kitchen is raw chicken, or just raw poultry in general, because it is the most, other than like certain types of greens, it is the most likely thing to be harboring foodborne pathogens. And the only reason that I add that caveat is because of the vast amount of like E. coli scares that have been happening over the last several years for various types of salad greens and related stuff. All right, so that's taken care of. Korma's in the oven. Stations are clean. That's one out of the way. And yes, I've got this as pointing at nothing, but that's okay. So I'm gonna do this. There we go. Ta-da! Now it's pointing at something, sort of. I mean, you'd know better than I do. You're the biologist. It's not that you can't trust leaves. It's that you can't trust people to wash them properly. Because let's be honest here, a lot of places where greens are commonly grown for mass production and consumption are full of people who are willing to take shortcuts. Every agricultural environment is full of people who are willing to take shortcuts, but some people have stronger senses of ethics than others. Or they simply just have different agricultural standards. Like the usage of human waste as a fertilizer is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does create a large amount of potential risks. Just as an example. All right, so now that we have a moment to breathe, I'm going to real quick clean my spice grinder. I'm going to throw a little bit of bread into my spice grinder, and I'm going to grind that up, which basically functions like a wet sponge. It's going to, the starch from it being a piece of bread is going to do a little scrubbing, and the residual moisture is going to, what the hell? Hold on a second. What the hell? Okay, there we go. That was I had an extremely odd moment. I had a USB moment with my outlet just now. But as I was saying, basically what bread does in your spice grinder, the crust functions as a scrubbing agent, and the residual moisture acts as just a general clearing agent, and also an aroma absorption agent. So if you've got some pretty aggressive spices that just came out of your spice grinder, using a piece of bread, or my personal preference is for corn tortillas, actually, but I don't have any of those on hand right now, to sort of grind out and absorb the residual aromatics. It's a good way to clean your spice grinder without unnecessary risks, because there's a lot of spice grinders that you can't put like in the dishwasher, and so you need, plan B to get a a suitable neutral state for your grinding spices. All right, so now that that's in the works, we're going to go back to something else we were working on yesterday, the stroganoff. And honestly, I'm just going to pull it out of the fridge and show you, because it's done. Looks like this. Boom. Now, this may not look super delicious offhand, but it's because I left it uncovered for a variety of reasons. One, additional evaporation to make sure that it got cooled very quickly and efficiently without endangering the rest of the fridge. And also, dry out the surface a little bit so that we ended up with a slightly crispier, crunchier bit of meat, which will happen, which will be advantageous once we heat this back up and eat it. Now, I'm not going to do that at the moment because this is tonight's dinner and I don't want to fiddle with it. But I want everybody to see that this is what it's, ideally, this is what it's supposed to look like. Now, it's pale in a way that it wasn't when it started. Why? Because if you remember, I talked about the final liaison yesterday, adding something to a final fat to enrich, embolden, and intensify flavor. And what was that one? More sour cream. So I took, once the meat was adequately cooked, once this was out of the oven, I pulled it, I took maybe about a half a cup of the cooking liquid, I let it cool a little, and then I stirred in a whole bunch of sour cream and a little bit more mustard, because both of those are delicious. You stir that together nice and easy, which warms up the sour cream slightly, the process called tempering, which again I mentioned yesterday. It's the same notion as when you're using eggs to make custard. You want to bring up the temperature of the delicate ingredient very gently and very slowly so that it doesn't have a negative reaction, like an aggressively negative reaction. Whereas, like if you're using eggs to make custard, you could scramble the eggs, and then you have breakfast instead of dessert. Whereas if you're using something like sour cream or yogurt for something like this, you want to keep it from curdling or crumbling, right? So you take some cooking liquid, you add your sour cream, you stir it till it's nice and evenly dissolved, everything's nice and warm, then you slowly stir it back in until it ends up looking like this. Now, I am admittedly curious. It probably needs a little salt. Not much, but a little. So I'm going to just have a real quick taste of the sauce itself. Maybe not. That's nice. Actually, yeah, that's really nice. Okay, I'm happy with that. Now, I am tasting this while it's cold rather than hot, which you have to be aware of. One of the interesting parts of how your palate, your tongue, and your taste buds approach flavor. Cold food is duller than hot food, at least according to your tongue and your taste buds. So anything that you serve cold has to be more aggressively spiced and aggressively seasoned than something equivalent that was served hot. So if something feels a little bit anemic, a little bit under seasoned when it's cold, but you know it's going to be served hot, you're probably okay. Now, let's see. Oh, that's odd. Oh, I see. Ha. Let's see. What's next? We have our stroganoff. We have our chicken korma. We have... not a whole heck of a lot of other stuff to work on, oddly enough, but we do have the remaining beef. For those of you that may remember from yesterday, that giant hunk of beef shoulder, it's not done. I've got the other half of it right here. Actually, more like the other 2/3 or possibly more. I'm going to put my chicken stock back in the fridge because I don't need it right now. Yes, it was in a very awkward size and shaped bowl to put in the fridge, but at the time, it was suitable. All right, so what do we do with this? Who knows? What do we want to do with this? We have chicken korma, we have beef stroganoff. We need to do something cool with meat. And since it's shoulder, it's going to be a little bit on the... it's one of those cuts that serves better as a slow-cooked item. So I suppose we could just make an old-fashioned pot roast. But the problem with that at the moment is that the oven is full, right? So I think what we're going to do with this is just get it ready for another preparation and stick it back in the fridge for another day. Now, here we go. I'm trying to remember where I put a couple of things. So we're going to take this out of the bowl because this bowl is enormous and was killing my available fridge space. I'm going to have to wash that later. Not going to do it right now, at least not right this second. Now you notice that let's see if I can. So as you can see, it's gotten a little bit darker in a couple of places. Partially that's because of oxygen, and partially that's because of salt. Hang on, there's a little nubbin of silver skin here I want to deal with. You see what I mean when I was talking about this yesterday. It's like once you start trimming like silver skin and fat and stuff off, you tend to tunnel vision and like not want to stop until you've accidentally gotten rid of like way more than you should have, and you've kind of wasted $10 or so of what would have been otherwise perfectly useful like fat. So I'm going to quite deliberately stop myself from fiddling with this anymore, and we're going to actually do the butchering. With one exception, there's a giant chunk of silver skin right here, and it's glaring at me. There we go. Okay. So we're going to take our beef, and we're going to, well, for starters, we're going to look at it. We've got this giant honking chunk of silver skin right here running straight through. So that's it's something that we have to be aware of and that we have to do something about throughout the course of our butchering. Now, it's not necessarily a deal breaker kind of problem, but it's something that you have to be aware of and that you have to be willing to work around and work through. So real quick, I'm just gonna, my goodness, like it actually bounced my knife. That's pretty impressive because this sucker is sharp. I actually grabbed one of my backup knives from my knife roll because I haven't had the chance to sit down with a proper sharpening stone and really give my daily choppers the business. All right. So now, as you can see here, see that line? That's some very thick, tough silver skin and connective tissue. We don't want to deal with that. So we're just going to very gently, we're going to slice right next to it, and we're going to see how close we can get without, obliterating our meat. And we're just going to let the knife do the work, because the silver skin, the connective tissue, it's way tougher than the flesh itself, so we don't actually have to worry about it too terribly much. So I'm just going to go straight on down, following the line. I'm actually going to just kind of stab it. And we're going to loosen this up. We're going to open it. And suddenly, we have a very large chunk of silver skin on this side, or of connective tissue, and on this side, because I kind of bisected it, which not necessarily a bad thing, but it does allow me much easier access to the whole shebang. So I can then work my way in, work my way over, and then carve it out. Ideally, with minimal loss of actual, edible, viable product. So it's not perfect, but it's way better than it was. And we're going to do the same thing again as I cut this second steak sort of thing out. While I'm working on this, does anybody have any questions on what I've gone over so far? We haven't done a whole heck of a lot of in-depth instruction this morning, but it never hurts. And even if you have something that we haven't gone over, I am here for you. So if you've got questions about food, cooking, life in general, if I have an answer, you can trust it. So we're just going to do the exact same thing again, straight on down through. Ideally on one side, but if you happen to do what I did last time and bisect it, well, that's okay. It's mostly okay. So you open it up, you make it obvious, and then you stab and you cut. Yeah, okay. So now I'm going to do the same thing pretty much on both sides of the large chunk of connective tissue to isolate it, at which point I can then just, hack it out without too much trouble. There we go. All right. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now we have, this is pretty much no different from what you do with like a beef tenderloin when you're removing the chain. So this is something that can be applied to various cuts of various animals. You do the same thing on a pig. You do this. You probably wouldn't have to do it on a chicken because chickens are too small, even now. Though the average chicken is twice the size that it was 50 years ago in terms of what you can get at the supermarket, which is kind of scary. And they are rife with what I call Hollywoods. The modern chicken has enormously large breasts, and that is concerning to me because breasts are the worst part of the chicken. Like they have the most potential utility, but also the least flavor, and so you have to play with them the most to get something viable out of them. All right, so now we have a whole bunch of good chunks. And so now that we have some room to maneuver, we can cut them into more manageable pieces. I'm actually just going to go straight along the line where I removed the silver skin on the bigger pieces so that we can, that sort of gives us a more sharply defined area in which to work. And incidentally, we now have 3 pieces that are about the same size, along with these 2 trimmed ones. Get rid of this chunk and this. Come on, here we go. In the process, I did leave a little bit of that massive chunk of connective tissue in this one, so I just taking a moment to do something about it. There we go. Right. Now we have a whole bunch of meat that I don't actually know what I'm going to do with. I still have no idea. So for now, I'm going to re-season it because in the process of butchering, we've lost a fair bit of the amount of the salt that we put on it the first time. We also have substantially more surface area of the meat exposed to the air. So we have to re-season it to make sure that the preservation continues. So we're just going to very gently season this with salt on every large exposed surface. We're going to throw it right back in the fridge, because now it's much more manageable than it was 5 minutes ago. Take these, I'm going to mash them in here, boom, boom, boom. Oh, and this little container takes up so much less room than the giant bowl that I was using before. It's like if you need to make something small, cut it into planks or strips. That's a great way to ensure things get nice and uniform. because a big ball like that shoulder cut, you just kind of have to let it sit. But if you cut it into steaks, you can stack them, or you can lay them flat, or you can do a whole bunch of other things that will allow you greater utility in terms of placement, storage, and frankly, just in general. So give me just a second to wash this bowl, which I'm actually pretty happy that I bought this because we didn't have a mixing bowl, and now we have a mixing bowl. But what we can't do with it is a lot of stuff. It can't go in the microwave. It can't go in the dishwasher. It can't go anywhere near the oven. It's a cheap $3 plastic mixing bowl, but I don't care. That's fine. As long as I can mix stuff in it, that's good enough for me. So now we have our meat, we have it wrapped, we have it seasoned, and now back in the fridge she goes. Hooah! Now let's see. We are going to take a moment to clean off everything here. Real quick, I'm just going to wipe out my knife. I'm going to clean the cutting board because there's raw meat all over it, and we really don't want to have to deal with that. Now, do we? So the next question is, since I am serving the stroganoff for dinner tonight, probably, and the korma tomorrow, what on earth am I going to serve it with? So, since I made this for just the two of us, my boy likes egg noodles. He's a very big fan of stroganoff with a giant pile of egg noodles, and I'm a-okay with that. But that even though that there's a fair bit of vegetable matter in the sauce, there's a lot of nutritional value in the sauce itself. It's not enough, in my mind, to qualify as a complete meal. Oh, you had a sandwich, now go have another. You should go have another. Or possibly some soup. Or maybe some dumplings. I don't know. For those of you that do not know, my mod there, Cantos the Husky, he's a very good boy, but he tends to undernourish himself. And as a chef, that bothers me slightly. Okay, so now I have a breather. Oh no. What? Have you not arranged a dentist visit yet? Come on, dog. If I end up getting to the dentist before you do, you will not hear the end of it. Because I have had a cracked tooth for almost 5 years, and I haven't been able to get to a dentist yet. You had better hustle. All right. Confounded dog. All right, so now that we have a breather, let's talk side dishes. So egg noodles are all well and good, and I am usually on board with those, but I need a little something more, right? Because they say meat and potatoes for a reason, but I want to do a little something else. So we're going to take this carrot, and we're going to work with that instead. Might actually roast off a couple of potatoes too, but first and foremost, we're going to start here. Now this carrot is kind of it's kind of on its way out, but it is still more than adequate for the purpose. So we're just going to peel it. We're going to do a little bit of knife work, and we are going to. I'm not even going to roast it. I'm actually going to prepare what's called a courbouillon. By which is a courbouillon is basically just a French for a quick stock. So the stock is the liquid in which many things are cooked, or that are it's what you use to make pretty much everything. It's just liquid that has flavor. Well, yes, I know, but that's what weekends are for, right? Alternatively, you're on your spring break. Ahem. So, for processing a carrot, honestly, there's not a whole heck of a lot to it. We're just going to, for start, I'm just going to do what we call the roll cut. So you take a, yeah, every dentist and orthodontist, most of their business is teenagers. When are they going to be available? Weekends. So when you start, let's see, what's the best way to show this off? Something like that. I'll go over here. So you start here, you do an angle cut, then you roll it 90 degrees, and you do it again. You roll it 90 degrees so that the angle is just like this, and then you cut it like so, and you continue to do that until you run out of carrot. Now this is a pretty useful way to get not uniform but consistently sized vegetable cuts out of something like root vegetables. So they all have the same sort of wonky wedge shape, but they are all about the same size and shape. And 1 carrot is plenty enough for the 2 of us, so we are going to prepare a courbouillon. We're going to begin with water, obviously. Hold on, I did a stupid. We begin with cold water. Let's swing back to the stovetop for a second. There we go. We're going to put our carrots in the cold water because that is how you do things when you are trying to cook them. Especially root vegetables, you always want to start them, if you're going to blanch them or boil them or whatever, you want to start it in cold water. Why? Because that will ensure a more even change in temperature. So we're going to add a bunch of salt to this water. We're going to add some sugar to this water as soon as I remember where the hell I put my sugar. Here we go. Yes, I know this looks weird. This is piloncillo. This is basically the Mexican brown sugar. It's wonderful. I love the stuff, but it's made, a lot of times it's made like old style. The reason that it's in a cone shape is because that's where it goes, because it's poured into molds. Did you really just, oh my God. I'm going to get you for that, Husky. All right, so the biggest downside to something like piloncillo is that it is, in fact, in a single piece, right? Like, if you want to use it for something, you kind of have to chop it up yourself. And sometimes that gets difficult because it's very tough. But I got away. I got a pretty much maybe a piece the size of 2, maybe 3 quarters, like U.S. quarters, or maybe 3 silver dollars. That might be closer. I'm gonna throw that in there. So we have salt, we have sugar, I'm gonna throw in a bay leaf. Why? Because I have them, and because they are an affordable source of both flavor and aroma. If I could remember where the hell I put them, because I did not put everything away yet. Bear with me for just a second, everybody. Here we go. Grab a bay leaf, shove it in here. So this is a great way to get a lot of flavor that doesn't necessarily get wasted. So we have salt, sugar, we have bay leaf. I'm going to add a little bit more water. Actually, yes, I'm going to add a little bit more water, and then I'm going to turn this on. The reason I only want just enough water to cover all of the things that I am planning on cooking here. So in this case, it's the carrots. I want all of them to be covered with the necessary liquid. And I'm going to bring this up to temperature on like medium, low. Why? Because again, I want the temperature of the carrots to rise